Today we're resealing the PTO on my 95 wide body, and as many of us know from the WOG, these are the pumps. It's actually the shaft that goes bad. So I'll do a video of the CPC 1040, which is the actual pump that goes into this PTO. That is the shaft that is in there. The rule of thumb is if the shaft on the pump is chipped up and screwed, then this shaft inside here is chipped up and screwed. So this is a 95. So if you've got the 95, 96, and 97, it's going to be a 267 that superseded this pump. But this one's a 266 XDF JP 5J or GK. So I printed this up to let everybody know what this means. So if you look at, this is my pump number right here. And so the 266 is the model number. This is the one for the 267. The next number that's in line is the X, which means standard mount. Then you're going to get down to the D, which is the ratio, 2844. The FJ means for Allison transmission. The P is for pressure lube. Some of the newer ones, you can do the retrofit kit to turn the P into a W, which is the wet spline. I'm not going to do that right now. That kit's about $700. The M is constant mesh, and then the 5 is the way the bulge is set up. So the bulge left is down, the bulge right is up. This is the key over here on these. These are all the output shafts. So the GK is the greasable. So you can have a pressure lube one that would be different. For greasable, 7/8, 13 tooth, and it's a SE 10 or 4 bolt. So that is the one that's in here. Now you can jump up to the 1-inch splines, which means you're going to also have to change your pump, which is going to go to a CPC 1049, not the 1040. So these are $2,000 now. The CPC 1040, I just got a quote on that pump. It is $2,100. So service these if they need to be serviced. On the 266, this is the Reseal kit, which we'll get into in a second because they don't send you all the parts. So this is a 329071-1X, and it's basically all the gaskets. You're going to have 3 different size gaskets, thin, medium, and thick. You're going to have some O-rings for a shaft that is right here, and then you're going to have a little O-ring that goes on the outside, which plugs this hole over here. So all we're doing today is resealing this. When you do these pumps, you want to make sure you index it. And if you get on YouTube and you type in Chelsea PTO rebuild, there's a gentleman that does a really good explanation of how to rebuild these things. I'm not going to get into that. It's already out there. But you want to index these things because they're offset the way they go in there. You can kind of see that on here. You can see it's really thin on one side and thick on the other side, so you want to make sure that you're getting those in. Now, here's the thing. I bought this kit, which was supposed to include all of the gaskets, and it didn't include all the gaskets. Where's our smashed out ones? They were a pain in the butt to get out of here, but I inadvertently ordered the wrong seal, which ended up being the right seal, because the kit does not include this 28P268. So you're going to have a seal on both sides. You're going to have a seal right in here, which, let me get that. That's included in the kit. 1250 2000. I think that's a 375 ETV. I'll go real slow on that. This is the side that hooks to the CPC pump. We had to beat the hell out of that. My buddy Todd heated it, and it was a mess. This seal, which is why we figured it was leaking. Which one was this? Was the one that was in there crooked? Somebody had rebuilt this before. Not that one. Yeah. So they put in there crooked, and so when you're putting these things in, you got to take your time to make sure you're pounding them in evenly. But the kit did not include this 28P268. This is $50 to $80 for this stupid seal, and this is it. I happened to, by mistake, order this off of eBay for $40, and when we got down here, we realized there was a seal on each side. So save yourself some frustration. You can order the 329071-1X, and then order the 28P268 because it doesn't include that. The other thing it didn't include was there's a cap that goes on the end right here, and that O-ring is not in there. I don't have it, but I can replace that once I get it back up, and that is going to go into the side of the shaft. It actually, oops, let me get it in there. It threads in to the side of the shaft right here, so that's a seal. But I looked up end play tolerances, and it turns out that the Allison, I've got the 4060, they already set the tolerances inside the transmission, but you have to look at the gasket count when you take it off. Now, this was rebuilt before, and it was rebuilt before, and they put the seal in wrong, so I don't really trust what they did, but we've got an idea of how many gaskets are on each side. So we're gonna play with it when we're done. What did he say? It was like 1 to 5 thousandths of an inch tolerance. So the inside of these, if you haven't seen them, there's a set of bearings on each side. This center shaft here, in order to get that out, you're gonna have to pull the bearings out with a puller on each side. These are in great shape. Even the races are in great shape. And then this bearing set here has got spacers on each side, and it goes through the center, or it fits in here. This goes through the center, but when you put this in, you can see that it's tapered on one side or cut out. That's because there's a pin that goes through here. So you don't want to put your new seal on and try to push it this way, because you're going to rip the seal. You need to push it in through this side way and line it up with the pin that's in there. So it's going to sit in like this. Watch his video. I'll see if I can link it below. He does a really good job of it. But I was pleasantly surprised when I pulled mine apart. It was leaking really bad. It was leaking because the seal was put in wrong. So we're just going to do a reseal on it, check the tolerances. I cleaned this up and painted it last night before I rebuilt it, just because the weather here in Denver is nice and I want to get this in today. And I didn't want to rebuild it and then have to wait for the paint to dry. So this number is the key. If you go into Chelsea, type in PTO 267, you'll come up with this sheet. You can't just go buy a random pump off of eBay because these numbers all need to match. Now, where you can get a difference is, again, if you're going with a pressure lube or a wet spline. Eventually, I will upgrade to a wet spline. I'm just not going to do it right now. And then your shafts down here. Now, they do have a good customer service telephone number that you can call, because a lot of these will look like they're the same, and you're going, well, what's the difference on the designator at the end? But they are worth looking at. They are worth servicing. They are worth putting a wet spline in. Now, there's a lot of talk about the grease that you put in here. It comes through this shaft on the pressure lube side through this Zert. I will tell you, there was nowhere near enough grease in this thing when I pulled it apart. So I'll probably do a little pump test to see how many pumps it takes to get it up into there, but not enough grease. Again, the grease that's used, there's been discussion on this on WOG. Some people say, oh, just use a regular grease, pump it full. There is a high friction, sticky, tacky grease, like a crimson red. Chelsea's got their own that you can order, but I think it's important that you do use that, because the damage coming from these allegedly is from when we leave our buses idling and not at high idle. That shaft vibrates with a harmonic vibration through it, and they start to chip apart. Again, I called the prior owner of my bus. We've stayed pretty good friends, and they had rebuilt this. They just made the error of bending the seal. So I hope this helps. This is the other shaft seal. This is the side of the PTO that mounts to the CPC 1040. Now, getting this off, you're going to have 10 bolts. These are, I believe they're 12 point. They were a pain in the ass to get off, and they're a real pain in the ass on this last one back here in the center. This one right here, because you can't really get a socket in there. They had Loctited these things on. Mother of God, they were hard to get out. Extremely hard to get out. So the way you can test to see if your shaft is okay, your CPC is going to come in here, and there's a big U-tube on the CPC pump, literally shaped like a U, and at the top of it you're going to see a rubber mount. If you just take those two screws out and then unbolt the CPC. Mine is just a 2-bolt. You can separate the pump. Mally Lennon told me how to do that a couple years ago. You can separate the pump from it. There's no fluid in here unless you have a wet spline. This is not a wet spline, so it won't have any fluid in here. And you can pull them apart and just check it. And I'll add that on here in a second so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So we've got this back together, and we're going to show you why the different thickness of gaskets matter. So we got this back together, and you will see there's a lot of play. If I go over to the gear side, you'll really see it. If you look down here, you can see that play. So that means we have too thick of gaskets in there. Now, we don't have this torque down all of the way, but I'm wondering if that's why on our buses some of these whine really bad. Now, my buddy Todd's a mechanic, and a part of it has to deal with, what'd you say, Todd, these straight? On the straight...
right, a straight cut gear versus a helical gear.
Yeah.
And how the gear sits into it.
Yeah.
Affects it.
So that could affect it. There was some play in this when we went to take it apart, but again, it's 1 to 5 thousandths of an inch. So there's a little bit of trial and error here when you put these back together, but something to think about. Check it when you're taking it out. Again, it may be worn just because of bearings and whatnot, but get an idea of what was there before you took it out. This is a lot looser than what we had. When you're putting it back on, you want to make sure you're oiling this seal and then the shaft, and then be very, very careful when you are putting them on and off that you don't tear that or flip it the wrong direction. So there's our stack. Taking you underneath the bus to show you how this all mounts up. So you can see this is where the PTO mounts up. And in my first part of this video, I talked about the tolerances set by Allison, and then I get into having to set the tolerances on the pump. What I mean by that is the tolerances for the main gear that go into the transmission are preset by Allison. But when we took the shaft out of the pump, the tolerances side to side are not. So when we put the gasket in, we had to reset those tolerances. This is the CPC 1040. Again, that's the 7/8 13 spline shaft. The CPC 1049 would be the 1-inch 15 spline or 15 tooth pump. So if you're going to upgrade, you'd have to change this pump. Now, this is the big U I was talking about, and right up top there, it's hard to see. You see the top side of that. There is a bracket that goes on it. Let me see if I can get my finger right there. So you have to unbolt that bracket. It's got 2 screws through it, big long bolts. That is it. And if you undo that and then unbolt the 2 bolts on the CPC pump, you can separate them. This is the shaft. As you can see, mine's a little dirty. I'll clean it up before I put it all back together here. You can see it's in pretty good shape. So this is the male end of the shaft that fits into the, obviously, female on the Chelsea PTO. And then they just bolt together. So there would be a gasket here if this was a wet spline PTO. This is not, so it's not necessary to have a gasket here. There is a gasket here. Now this gasket, when you put it in here, it's raised on one side. The raised side goes out. You want it out from the transmission. And then you're going to torque those down to the best that I can find, 40 foot-pounds of pressure. And then these are the bolts that go in there. So 10 of them. So I'll show you here in a second when it's all back together. Going to check the end play with a dial indicator for the shaft that supplies the CPC 1040. Earlier I said you cannot adjust the end play. You can't do it on the main gear, but on the shaft that supplies power to the CPC 1040 or 1049, if you have the 1-inch, it is adjusted by the gaskets that you put in here. And so the tolerance is 1/1000th to 5/1000ths, and so it's gonna be a little bit hard. I've got to reach in here. I'm grabbing the gear all the way back in there and lifting up, and I'm gonna check them and see. There we go. So I'm about 3/1000ths. So I know I'm good. You can get these on Amazon. If you're working on your bus, you use these for when you're replacing wheel seals to tighten up your axle nuts. So they're worth having, just to make sure that you're in. I had got the axle seals all set up, thought I was good. I put this on there and I had them way too tight. So again, this is going to be the side that the CPC bolts to, and that is what is going to the transmission. We'll get it on here. So this is the PTO and the CPC 1040 pump together. Now, it's easy for me to get to it because this is my battery bay. I'm sorry, it's dark. It's getting dark out. My battery bay for my bus. That's where my inverters used to be. I don't think I put out a video yet of this, but my batteries are gone from here. I switched to lithium, so they're all relocated, but it makes it super easy. When this space is empty, I have that box that fits in there, and that houses my Boondock charger because I've switched to lithium, so everything's separate from the inverters. But this is the CPC PTO combo. Now, up there is the bracket I was talking about that you have to take off, and that allows this U-shaped pipe to drop down. There's two 3/4 inch nut and bolt here and down there that separate that. So if you just separate those two, obviously there and down there, then you'll get to your shaft. And I said earlier there are 10 bolts on here. There's not. There's 8. There's also 2 additional holes in the gasket, but those are for the alignment studs. So the best that I could find was 40 foot-pounds for torque on those. And then obviously the shaft. So I pumped it pretty full. It got about 7-8 good pumps full in there, and then I ran it and it running great. Now I'm looking and waiting to see if it starts leaking after I shut it off. That's when it seemed to leak before. So I'm super happy to have this done. I'm super happy that I didn't need a new one, knock on wood. But hope this helps you all. As always, keep on keeping these birds alive.